what do we do with our trash? And it turns out that the majority of things that we throw away end up in a landfill in the United States. Now, there's a couple of keywords I've thrown up here off to the side and the bottom that you need to know. First of all modern landfills must be built with a compressed layer of clay underneath the whole thing. The reason for the clay, if you remember anything about soil, there are three particle sizes: sand, silt, and clay. Clay is the finest, and when you squeeze it, it becomes impermeable. So if this landfill were to leak, or if there were problems with rainwater getting in, it would still contain the toxins, prevent them from getting out and into the surrounding groundwater. So that impermeable clay layer at the bottom is step one. And from there, they go through and add all kinds of safety things. They add plastic. They add areas to collect what is called leachate. That's on the left. So leachate is the garbage juice that drips down, and they can collect that and pump it out so that it does not flood into surrounding groundwater. As you decompose garbage, methane is produced. Anything that's organic in there is going to release the simplest of hydrocarbons, CH4. And so we have to collect that. It's light, it's a very light gas, so it's going to rise up out of the landfill. So there are tubes to collect the buildup of methane gas. And I'll show you in a second, in some cases, they just burn it. So they do just put it in the atmosphere. So a lot of places now have converted and they collect the methane and use it to produce electricity, just like burning natural gas in our power plants. So it spins a turbine and all that. Federal law does not allow landfills to be built near major sources of groundwater, right? A wetland or a floodplain. And they even protect it from places that might have earthquakes. We would hate for that bottom of the landfill to crack and open up. That would obviously be very bad for the surrounding groundwater. There's certain things you can and can't put in the trash. And people still try to sneak it in. Tires is a particularly bad item. And the real problem is that they have that little trough inside and water will collect. And then you've got insect problems, primarily mosquitoes. E-waste has become a huge problem over the last 20 years. We have all this awesome technology, but a lot of it should not go in regular landfills. Things like CFLs that have mercury in them. Almost all electronic devices, phones, computers, they all have heavy metals or rare earth metals in them that if that leaks into our water, it is a problem. So there are centers where you can recycle old phones and computers. See lead in old car batteries. Now, I mentioned that one of the things they can do is burn off the methane that collects, and that's what it looks like. Now, that's different from incineration. Incineration is actually where you burn the trash. Instead of piling it all up, you burn it. My grandma lived out in the country, and she never had trash collection. She had a burn barrel. Whatever trash she made went out there. She didn't care what it was. She was burning plastics, all that toxic fume coming up out. She didn't care. But it was out in the field, nothing around it. That adds up though, if everybody's doing it. And a big incineration plant is gonna stink. And obviously you're gonna have huge air pollution problems because once again, people throw things in the trash they shouldn't. But you can use an incinerator to make energy, but it's no different than fossil fuels. This is pretty cool though. In Denmark, they have designed this building. It's really just a big trash incinerator. They can burn 70 tons of trash an hour. And that's enough electricity for 120,000 homes. The designer wanted the building to be as green as possible, so they built a park into it, and that's actually a ski slope. If you're into that, you can go ski down the hill. Even in non-winter time, they have those roller skis. Yeah. So I don't know, it might be kind of fun. It's multi-use for something that your city needs. And just like we learned about with coal plants, they have incorporated all three of the major pollutant reducers. So you've got your electrostatic precipitators. Those are the ones that take out particulate matter, the dust, the small particles. Wet scrubbers, which take out the sulfur. They use calcium carbonate, limestone chips to spray it, turn it into gypsum. And then catalytic converters, do we remember what those remove? Those remove the nitrogen gases, NOx. Okay, so we're taking out all that bad stuff, and that comes out as what we call slag, which is the solid waste. And so mostly what they're pumping out here is water vapor. So it's actually a relatively clean facility. Definitely state of the art in terms of getting rid of trash. Here's an old landfill that was finally covered up, and they're eventually going to turn that into a park, which, as long as it's covered up properly, should not be a problem. And they're still going to have methane vents and things like that. But what do you do with an old landfill? An alternative to a lot of our trash is recycling. There's actually two kinds of recycling. Primary recycling, which is when you take something and turn it back into what it was. And there are a couple of types of plastics that you can turn. If you have a plastic container, you can turn it back into another plastic container. Now, every time you recycle, though, with something that's hydrocarbon or plastic based, you lose some of the quality. So it can only be recycled so many times. And it usually can't be recycled into the exact same thing. Now, glass, most metals, those actually can be used over and over and over. They just melt them down and reform them. The plastic does not work that way. But they can take all the different little chunks and pieces of plastic and turn it into new things. That's called secondary recycling. And I actually have this at my house. I bought the high quality Trex decking boards. And so my deck is made out of recycled plastic, and it's squeezed very tightly together. And I tell you, I've had this stuff a good decade now. It does not fade. It does not chip. It does not get dirty. You just spray it off and it's clean. Before that, I had a wood deck, and it was the most ridiculous amount of work. You buy stain, and it's like, this stain will last 5 years. In Indiana, it lasted about 5 weeks. I was staining that deck every single summer, spending hours on it. I don't have to do that now. This composite plastic material is really nice. Now, yesterday you read a little bit about some of the problems really with recycling. It can be expensive. There's energy that goes into collecting it and then melting it down and sorting it. And you're spending almost as much energy recycling it as you would be just developing or getting new materials. So there's a trade-off there. Most people throw things like plastic bags in there, and those are a problem. They clog up the machines. They cannot be recycled. People will collect their recycle in big trash bags and throw that in, and that's a problem. The recycling needs to be loose. And then we get to the point where people are recycling, which is great, but we collect so much recycling, the plants can't keep up. And what do they do with the extra recycling? Into a dump. So we're not recycling what people are even collecting. We got to the point where we had so much recycling, we were shipping it overseas. Well, that takes fossil fuels to send recycling around the world. And then China was just throwing it away because they had too much. And then we get the giant big floating trash island in the Pacific Ocean. Now, organic materials, we can compost. I have tried to compost at my house multiple times. We've done very small scale, and then we tried to upscale it. And now we don't compost at all. It stinks. It's gross if you get a big compost pile. You definitely want to have space in your property where you can put it back in a corner and stay away from it. You'll get bugs. If you are into gardening or you have a place where you grow native plants and things, you can spread it around. Then when it does decompose, it makes the best fertilizer. It's all natural. Don't have to worry about runoff from man-made fertilizers, eutrophication. So there are some really great things about composting. You also have to know what you're doing. because there's things that should or should not go into composting, and it's not hard to learn. These are some of the yes and the no. You can see on the left-hand side, you've got peels and shells from your vegetables. Obviously, plants that get trimmed or clipped, throw that in there. If paper is shredded, paper is carbon-based, that'll break down. Coffee grinds. And there's a couple things on the right-hand side that might surprise you. Some of them have to do with how long they take to decompose. And so they're going to be in there too long and they're going to get moldy, or they're going to attract bugs. They can change the acidity. That's some of the problems you have with well, citrus. You're going to change the pH of the soil around it.